Hello and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Room 313 Symposium. My name is Jason Roba, and I'm here with Thomas Sheridan, Timothy Wild, and James Szubski. He's the Chief Operations Officer of Margie's Outdoor Store here in the Pacific Northwest. James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So if you could give our audience here a little bit of a background about who you are and what you're into and what we're going to be talking about here on the show.
Sure. Margie's Outdoor Store is located in Bingen, Washington, which is in the Columbia River Gorge, just a little bit west of where Timothy and Jason are. And Margie's Outdoor Store is, we are known as the most unusual store in the Gorge. Of course, we have outdoor gear, a lot of adventure gear for climbing, hiking, kayaking, that whole kind of thing. We also have some items for practical magic. And so that whole range of, I guess you'd call new age type stuff. And a friend of the family is what is known as a warden and protector. And we realized that we were getting a lot of folks coming into the store talking about their paranormal and supernatural experiences in the Gorge. The Gorge has long been recognized as a Sasquatch hotspot, I guess they call them unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, used to call them UFOs back in the day, and a whole range of what people would call paranormal activity or experiences have been happening here for centuries. And so we had a lot of folks coming into the store telling us about their activities and their encounters and things like that. And our friend, the warden, asked if we would be willing to take in reports. One of the things that's occurring right now is our world is going through some very significant changes. And we're starting to see an increase in paranormal activity. This is coinciding with all of the other crazy things that we see going on, whether it be wildfires or earthquakes or just the strangeness of the news. So the physical realm and the non-physical realm are linked, and these things are happening in parallel. So the Gorge is because of the way it was created, a very sensitive area. And as these changes occur throughout our entire planet, places like the Gorge see these activities and these phenomena first, sort of like a canary in a coal mine. And because of that, and because of the increased activity, we were asked to help out. So we now are advertising that we take in paranormal reports in the store. And of course, there's folks that see it as a marketing gimmick. And I'm not going to lie, yeah, sure, there's some traffic that's generated by that. But really, this is something which is we feel is important. And there are very legitimate things that are going on out here. And to have a physical place where people can come and file reports and then forward them on to somebody who can make some sense of them, that's what we're doing.
Awesome. That's really, really great that we've got resources like you guys here in the Pacific Northwest. Because like you're saying, there are some esoteric shops out there, some, more new age shops, but like any actual bona fide, occult material, it's difficult to find anywhere besides going online or ordering something overseas from, Thomas's neck of the woods. But you talked about the Columbia River Gorge, and if we could maybe have you talk a little bit about what it is and how it was formed. I know we've got some interesting geology surrounding the Columbia River Gorge. So if you could take it away with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Columbia River Gorge basically starts just a little bit east of Portland and extends 80 miles east of there. There's an area called the Scenic Columbia River Gorge. It's been nationally designated as such. Covers probably close to 457 square miles. The Columbia Gorge itself, Columbia River, is the largest river flowing into the Pacific Ocean in North America. I think in South America too. So it is a gigantic waterway. There's a huge drainage all throughout the entire Northwest. Now, this river has been flowing for literally millions and millions of years. And then about 15 million years ago, right on the Idaho border, this enormous eruptive event occurred. And it occurred over a very long period of time. And basically, it was fountains of lava. So you can imagine, like in Hawaii, when you see like just a whole wall of lava coming up. Well, this happened over 300 times. And these huge fountains of lava, there's some theories that say that it was a meteor impact that initially pierced the crust that started this whole process. But what occurred was that lava flows flowed all the way 300 miles from the Idaho border, basically to the Pacific Ocean. And so there are layers and layers and layers of basalt. And when you look around the gorge, you see these strange layer cake formations. It almost doesn't look real. And when that lava cooled, a couple of things happened. Some of it formed in these columnar basalt cliffs, which is the way that the basalt cools. It's a crystalline type of process. And there are lava tubes all throughout the area and these types of things. And so this was what is 100% an apocalyptic event, right? When you have lava that eventually formed rock that is thousands of feet thick that flowed across this region from the east to the west to the ocean. That was sort of what laid down the bedrock of literally what the gorge is today. And then between 12 and 15,000 years ago, I'm sure your folks are familiar with the Younger Dryas impact theory.
Yeah.
So Western Washington has evidence of truly biblical floods. And some of the leading theories are that either meteorites or a solar outburst struck the earth and flash melted the ice shelf, the glacial ice age ice shelf that was in Canada, and created this titanic flood that was in some places well over 300 to 400 feet deep. It washed through the area where you folks live, and then it funneled down through the gorge. And this event was so significant that it literally raised sea levels globally more than 300 feet. But that all flowed through the Columbia River Gorge, pulling with it chunks of rock and icebergs and all the things they came right through the gorge. This was the spot at which it flowed through. And so it ripped all that bedrock up and created this channel, which formed, you can see behind me, some of the very dramatic landscapes. And so these two geological processes, one which was an apocalypse of fire and the other which was a cataclysm of water, are what formed the gorge. And 15,000 years ago is really geologically not that long ago at all. Part of what happened when that occurred was that on the Oregon side, the way that those things eventually tilted, the Oregon side is the high side. So if it's tilting like this, the Oregon side now has these huge cliffs on it. And so there are some of the most stunning waterfalls in the world. In fact, the gorge is known as having the highest concentration of waterfalls anywhere in America. And then the Washington side also has a number of unique geological features because of this, these two cataclysms which created the place that it is. On a, I guess, paranormal or metaphysical level, what this had the effect of doing was sort of weakening the barriers between worlds. And that sounds strange. Just another way to put it.
Sounds normal to us folks. This to our audience, that this is the real meat. Like they've all seen our Sasquatch film. I don't know. Did you have you had a chance to check out?
I haven't
Sasquatch?
had a chance to see that one yet.
But I think you'll really enjoy our point of view on that one. That it's not, we're not talking necessarily about a big ape creature, but we're talking about an interdimensional being. And
yes,
like what you're just saying, there's a rift or a chasm that's right there between reality. Yeah. So sorry, I'll let you carry on with that. But yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that, and I'll tell you what's in these envelopes right here. Did you have something to say, Thomas?
No, I was just saying. I love the way, James, you're describing the cataclysm as almost like an alchemical landscape. It's it definitely gives that that veracity to the concept that it was almost like an alchemical colossal event that ripped open, reality structure to something.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in this, but what seems to be happening is that these events that are occurring in our physical realm, our physical realm is the realm of results. It's sort of the bottom of the spiritual ladder, and so these events have roots that extend through all the metaphysical realms. And so when something like that's this cataclysmic, that's this significant is occurring, that's rippling through all the different realms, up and down the metaphysical realm, ladder, I guess you call it. Jason?
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say it. That also reminds me too, since we're here on this side of the state, was something like this also what created the dry falls over closer. Yeah. So that is when you're talking about the 12 to 15,000 year ago event. That's what caused that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That flood, basically all of Western Washington. You can't even imagine the trillions of tons of ice that were encapsulated in the Laurentine lobe during the Ice Age. Like this was 2 miles thick of ice, and for it to be flash melted, and I'm sure you folks are familiar with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson and those guys. They talk about this a lot. And we still don't know exactly all the mechanisms, and they're still looking for craters and things like that. If a meteorite landed on ice, a crater would be very hard to find. But what is very, very clear is that like trillions of tons of ice were flash melted. And all of Western Washington, the whole Channel Scablands, is an environment unlike anywhere else in the world. There's no place, maybe there's one or two places that show anything like this level of flooding. And you can't even really imagine, like you stand in some of these places, like where the picture behind me in the gorge, like 300 feet above where my body is in this image, was covered with water. And it's flowing at 60 miles an hour, and it's filled with, icebergs and giant rocks, like rocks the size of buses. And they're just tumbling down the gorge, ripping things off of the walls and creating this. It's a fantastical landscape. It's like living in a, fantasy movie or something like that. And so these things are occurring here in our physical realm in very obvious ways, but those things are also occurring in the metaphysical realms as well. And if you consider the complete and total destruction of what happened during those floods, anything that was here before would be completely wiped from the slate. Like there is no question that if Seattle was situated where the gorge is now, you wouldn't even find bricks because they would all be pushed into the Pacific Ocean. Like there's nothing that would have survived this kind of cataclysm. And so that just like you're just rubbing those boundaries of the world really, really thin at that point. But there's something else that's happening here. And so the Columbia River existed before the lava flows. And it, of course, existed, and it continued to carve and carve and carve even while the lava flows were going on, changing its course. And then that giant flood came, which just swelled it and just further dug this groove of energy that's flowing through here. The gorge today is considered the windsurfing capital of the world. It's one of the windiest, coolest places to do it. And so you've got this very strong current that's always flowing, so always abrading these boundaries between the worlds of the water itself. And then you've got this continual wind action that's happening as well. Again, the easiest way we can think about it is, in a physical analogy, is as it's just getting rubbed thin and thin and thin. And then, of course, this has become a huge transportation corridor. So on either side of the gorge, there are rail lines. So there are at least 2 bars of iron that run the entire length of the gorge on both banks. And Margie's store is right close to one of those rail lines. And those trains are moving through there every single day, at least 12 trains a day on both sides. And some of these are, it's, if you think about it, it is sometimes 2 miles of iron that's moving on iron tracks in either direction down the gorge continually. And then, of course, there are roads on the other side, so 2 highways on the other side. The gorge is the only sea level passageway through the Cascade Mountains. And so all of these things are sort of multiplying and adding on to this strong current of energy. And if you come and visit the gorge and you calm your mind for just even a moment, like you can really feel that energy, that there is this strong sense of movement that's happening here. And I think this is true. You may have mentioned it, Thomas, in one of the other videos, that this happens a lot in a lot of river gorges are places where are supernatural hotspots or places where there's power occurring. And so all these things are coming together to create this really unique environment that has this undeniably strong flow of energy going through it. And it's because of that access points to other realms, I guess is the easiest way to explain it, are more accessible. And the people who live in the gorge are exposed to this flow 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And so it has an effect on them as well. And so many of the old timers who visit the store have tales to tell about unusual encounters and strange experiences. And then the people who visit the gorge are suddenly plunged into this sort of supercharged environment, and they are encountering things. First of all, they're taken out of their everyday pattern. And so you can easily get your blinders on when you're going to work, coming home from work, doing your same routine, and you don't notice the things that are around you. So anytime you're traveling, you're more aware of the unusual. Your senses are opening up. But then you're here in the gorge where there's this strong current of energy, where things are almost even accidentally passing between realms, and you turn out of the corner eye, you see things, and so we can get into some of those stories of things that we've heard here at the store. But I feel like I've been talking for a long time. Give you guys a chance to jump in.
I was just saying about the river valleys. That's actually very interesting, because on a smaller scale, but very similar, is the Hudson Valley in New York, just in Westchester County, just north of New York State. And that was carved by a massive glacier coming down. It's got 2 railroad lines 4 on either side. And that place is a hotspot too, especially where the actual Hudson narrows up around Bear Mountain and Indian Point. It's a tremendous hotspot of UFO and other kind of activity. And what you said there about the rail lines, I'd never considered that before, but they would actually be very, they could actually have giant antennas and things like this in these areas to amplify frequencies, or even to change our own levels of consciousness and maybe affect our own nervous systems. That's a very interesting point. I've never in all my time thought about that, but actually it does make a lot of sense.
I mean, there's so many. Oh, go ahead, please, Jason.
I was going to say, especially the ones that are they're continuous now. They're not joined together like they were back. I want to say they switched everything out in the early 2000s, where there's a continuous line, rail line that's not broken at all. It's not seamed together. And I want to say they did, and they lifted them up a little bit higher, but I don't remember when that was done. I want to say that was done in the late 90s, early 2000s, but yeah. Yeah.
And, I mean, there's so much folklore around the impact of iron on fey creatures and how important that is. And the whole, that lore didn't come around by accident. And so you've got this double iron barrier on each side containing this flow. And again, I'm not an expert in these things, but I think that they're, even on the North Shore and the South Shore, like the types of entities that exist, it's like the geographical separation kind of a thing. And so there's different kinds of entities that evolved in separately. And so they have their own unique kind of characteristics on the Oregon side and on the Washington side. But it's fascinating stuff. It really is. Like a couple of the hotels in the area have pools. And if you go out to one of those outdoor pools at night and you lay down in that pool, the sense of movement energy is absolutely undeniable. I don't care who you are, like you feel it, even if you're completely, this is not a realm that you participate in or think about at all. Like people who come to the Gorge really easily recognize that there's something special and unusual going on here. And so.
And I think it's strangely synchronistic too. I was going to bring this up earlier, but I wanted to wait until we were a little bit deeper into the topic. But about the Columbia River and how a while ago they decided to make the plutonium for the bomb here, and we're talking about ripping open reality structures, and how you were talking about the cataclysmic events that occurred along here, tearing open the fabric of reality. Something a pet subject we've been talking about a little bit recently is the idea of atomic bombs. That same kind of ability to rip open, passageway between the different, if we're talking about causal realms and physical realms, that with the atomic bomb, right here in Richland or up the road at the Hanford site, they were making that plutonium that was used for the bombs and
First,
probably, probably hole punching, with, just not little, but these pathways into other realities. And it's just, again, right here. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's no accident that there are two gigantic hydroelectric dams in the Gorge. And then there's one further up at the Grand Coulee Dam, which is north of you folks. And basically these three dams are powering most of the West Coast. Like literally, if you think about the energy that's flowing through here has been harnessed and is powering our society. Like that's a physical reality that you just cannot deny. That, holy cow, like believe what you want about metaphysical and airy-fairy type of different realms and everything else. You cannot deny that the energy that flows through here literally in the past 100 years absolutely changed the way everyone in America lives. Like that energy is literally powering our lifestyle. And so to me, that's just a fascinating, it's switching your perspective. Like, there's a engineering problem of how you create a dam and generate power and everything like that. But this is an undeniable reality that this energy here powers our world. I find that just amazing.
Absolutely. And again, like Thomas was talking about, this is an incredibly alchemical thing, taking one form of matter and turning it into another form of matter or into energy at this point. Like you were talking about earlier, we had a cataclysmic event of fire and then a cataclysmic event of water, both, opposing elements and kind of the Western esoteric tradition. But
so recently, there are things that are occurring, and I don't know how if you guys have done any coverage on what's happening to our magnetosphere. So the Earth has a magnetic shield. And basically what the magnetosphere does is, first of all, it determines our north and south pole. And it also shields us from enormous amounts of energy that come from the sun and from other cosmic sources. And so we have enjoyed a very stable magnetic environment for thousands of years. If you look back at the fossil record, we see many instances of the magnetic poles flipping. And there's a whole set of theories about, pole shifts and all that kind of stuff like that. But right now, and it actually started in 1859 during the Carrington event. Are you folks familiar with the Carrington event?
Yes.
Just for the audience, basically there was a giant magnetic or a solar outburst, which supercharged. It sent huge amounts of energy to Earth. Aurora Borealis was seen as far south as Cuba. Telegraph lines caught on fire. Some telegraph lines shocked the operators. Some telegraph lines started operating on their own. If it happened today, our power grid would be wiped out because it would have burnt out the wires. So this event occurred in 1859. And ever since that time, there's been an acceleration in the movement of the poles. So the North Pole is traditionally located in Canada. And then starting in 1859, it started wandering in a dramatic fashion. And now it is literally racing across the Arctic Ocean and headed to Siberia. At the same time, this magnetic South Pole has left the continent of Antarctica, and it is moving as well. So this is a dramatic change, and its speed is accelerating. Now, this is not fringe science. The European Space Agency set up their swarm satellites, which were designed to specifically study this. And it's really clear through their data that, yes, not only are the poles moving dramatically, their speed of movement is accelerating. And it's at the point where they normally have to update, navigational maps, every 5 years. And I think it was last year they had to do a mid cycle update because it had moved so much that it was throwing off international travel and commerce. Coinciding with the movement of the poles is a weakening of the magnetic shield. And so the Earth could easily withstand fairly large solar outbursts, and that magnetic shield would buff up and just sort of send the energy around the planet. Well, as the shield weakens, smaller outbursts have bigger effects. And so you see power outages and other types of things, or satellite interruptions or communications interruptions and things like that. The magnetic shield is weakening at an accelerating rate. And so what that means is that huge amounts of energy, which were formerly sort of glanced off the Earth's magnetic shield, are being poured directly into the Earth and all of the creatures that live there. And, there's lots of different theories about why the Earth is changing the way it is, whether it be global warming or whatever. But one thing that is undeniable is that there is 100% scientific proof that the magnetic shield is weakening and that we are absorbing more energy from the sun. And of course, these things are happening all up and down the different realms. And as these things get supercharged, again, places like the Gorge, all of those weak spots are now having more energy poured through them. And we believe that that's why there's this increase in strange and unusual activity here.
I was going to say too, with the strange energies from space or from the sun, wherever, and them coming in through our weakened magnetosphere, and we were talking about cataclysmic events that occurred, not necessarily being able to find a crater, an impact crater. Is it possible that the last time in this cycle that this occurred and the Earth's magnetosphere was weakened, that what caused the cataclysm was like the equivalent of like a plasma discharge from either the sun to the Earth or from another planet to the Earth or from the moon, something like that, where it just zapped and it caused a tremendous amount of heat. And
when you look around the Earth, there are vitrified stones. I think there are some even in where Thomas is from. And so the vitrified stones are stones that have been superheated and melted. That's not something that happens around a campfire or even a kiln. And a meteor explains some of the phenomenon that we see. I think a solar outburst explains it maybe better. It's not my field of expertise. I'm a businessman, so interested in these things. But yes, I think you're correct that that's very much a possibility. And the notion that, again, when inflection points happen, we, I think, are living through one. And so we haven't seen that major solar outburst right now, but we are at a point where we're more vulnerable to it than we've ever been. And so.
What do you think about the idea of entities riding in on the lightning, so to speak, with that? If we're talking about new life showing up and coming between these rifts in space and time, that through that actual plasma or whatever it is that discharges between the two terminals, whether the two terminals are the sun and the earth, we'll just call it that for now. And there's that discharge of that arc that's there, that somehow within that plasma is where new life forms or life forms from somewhere else come through, is on that plasma, because we know through different folklore there are entities that come from smokeless fire, so to speak. So we can translate that into plasma, right? So that idea that they're made up of, or they're composed of that matter, that could possibly be where some of these what people would consider to be cryptids, but are more like we talked about with the Sasquatch entity, that there's some other form of life form that doesn't totally appear in this reality, but is something from another reality that partially imposes itself into our space-time here, so that something actually comes through that plasma.
That's a really interesting theory, and I think there could be a lot of merit to that. What I know is that there are realms that are very close to ours, and things like those large cryptids likely are able to travel. We can pass into that realm, and they can pass into our realm. And so, why aren't there bodies and things like that? Well, that's because they go home.
Yeah, this is good stuff. This is.
I'm so down with that, particularly. If you look at the folklore, like the fairy folklore in Ireland and the Celtic world and the Sasquatch thing, the whole thing is, well, why don't we find bodies? Why don't we find this kind of thing? And like you said, we get glimpses into their world and they get glimpses into our world. And it's fleeting, and that the right conditions have to create it. And I think geology plays an enormous part in it. I'm particularly interested, I'm going to ask the next question. We discovered during our own investigation into the Sasquatch thing that generally a higher concentration of sightings were in areas where are high in quartz. What's the story with quartz in that part of the world where you are, James?
Rock hounding is huge out here, and there are. I'm going to tell you that I don't know a lot about quartz in this area. I do know that, like you saw that picture maybe from the article of Beacon Rock, and that is all columnar basalt, which is it forms into these hexagonal columns, sometimes 80, 100, 200 feet high, that are literal crystals. And so, like Beacon Rock is a collection of 200-foot crystals. I mean, there's just no way of getting around it. And the whole gorge, like you drive up and down the gorge and you see the cliff walls are these giant crystal structures.
Oh,
and,
so it's similar to like Devil's Tower in Wyoming.
Exactly.
And the giant causeway here in Ireland. And they're all associated with mythology as well. So there you go.
And obviously, crystals are used in radios. And so they are, part of the, core transmittive tool. One of the ways that you're able to bridge those gaps through whatever's going on there. And so I think that you're very astute. And I think that that it is clear that that's part of the puzzle that we're looking at, is those are basic transmitters or focusers or whatever you want to, whatever analogy makes sense there.
Before I jump in,
go on, please.
There's an island, and this is a fascinating story. My main interest is megaliths and ancient sites. There is actually a ancient site in Micronesia. It's a whole island of it, actually. And all the megaliths are made out of exclusively the hexagonal basalt shapes, the columns. And you can actually see that the people who built these were playing with them as if they were trying to tune in a radio. Moving the columns here, moving the columns there. It's the only place in the world I'm aware of that the native people actually saw something. Okay, they're attractive, we know that. But it looks like technology the way they were playing with them.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of reading about that. It's fascinating stuff, and again, not my field of expertise, but it certainly seems to make sense to me that these crystals have a part to play in sort of helping bridge the gaps between the worlds, and again, like the Gorge is lousy with them. And so not surprised that, we see all kinds of unusual, non-standard things here.
So speaking of that and non-standard things and getting into some of the stories, the first one I kind of wanted to ask about, and then we'll go on to some other stories if you don't mind telling, but I wanted to specifically ask with this, and I was pointing at the top of my head with the pineal gland and that connection between, there being a little crystal in there. But have you ever gotten any stories of people discussing walk-ins or other entities, or excuse me, other humans that are just not quite human coming through at the store, or people telling stories where they run into someone who's just not quite right, that what we could, in our circles here, our esoteric circles, would call a walk-in, or some other kind of non-human entity?
One really interesting story we got, there was a young man, was actually on the Oregon side, not far from Hood River. And he was, he parked his car, was making out with his girlfriend. And he stepped outside for a minute, and he saw what he describes as a withered old man, completely naked, who wandered up and scared the crap out of him. And then once he caught his attention, the old man just ran off into the woods. And so there's more details, and I'm holding a few things back. But basically, that is what I would consider a tale exactly in line with what you're talking about, where I'm sure that there's probably weird naked old guys running around, but this one, was really not in a place that made sense. There was no other cars around in this particular area, and the speed with which he moved into the woods, and the general strangeness of his demeanor, and then the fact that he completely disappeared once he hit the wood line. To me, that sort of falls right into that category of walk-ins, where whatever that was, it probably doesn't have a driver's license, we'll say.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. Especially, there's been, I've run into what I would consider to be like maybe a golem before, where again, somebody was naked. There's a younger guy who came out of the water, and I didn't see him swimming before. And he came out of the water, and he was mumbling, and like, maybe this guy is just got done with a really bad mushroom trip or something, and he's getting out of the water. Or there's some like I mentioned, a walk-in that this guy, was tripping or something, and then he ended up an entity walking into him and then coming out of the water. But again, just strange beings in human form sometime that are there. There's a human body walking around, but whatever's in that body is not quite human. But so as far as stories and reports that you've gotten along the Gorge, what are some of the other more notable strange stories that our audience might enjoy hearing about, so that might bring them here to bring their cameras and try to record some things on their own?
Well, so first of all, I want to say that, when I made the decision to help out the warden and to open our store as a place of reporting, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. But, I believe in the cause, and so it seemed worth taking a risk. And I have been amazed and delighted by the overwhelmingly positive response from the community. And so, I conducted that interview that you guys read on air, and that went live, and then it got, we reposted it to a couple of Facebook pages. And by far, the overwhelming, there were likes, and probably about 25% of them were hearts, not just thumbs up. And I thought, that's unexpected that there are that many folks that have really positive feelings. And so many of the comments were also very, very positive. There were a few folks that, said, they laughed it off, or they said that, no reasonable person would believe in something like this, and we pointed them to the Pentagon releasing information about UFOs and saying, well, those floozy thinkers over at the Pentagon might disagree with you about what's reasonable to think about. But by and large, just incredibly positive response. And in retrospect, it's not that surprising. I mean, these people live here. They have been seeing this stuff for decades. And so the other thing that, I received a lot of personal messages, and many people were thanking me and saying, thank you for articulating this in a way that didn't make me feel like a kook, that validated my experiences. I know that what I experienced was real, and this was a moment where someone was taking me seriously and not judging me, and creating a forum and a space for this to be discussed that wasn't, a wink and a nod or a, Sasquatch coffee stand on the side of the road, but a real legitimate understanding of that this phenomena is real, and people have been experiencing it, and that there's something going on here. And so, I had mentioned in my note to you folks that there's an enormous importance of having compassion when you're dealing with this type of work. Some people, have held this secret their whole lives, and for them to come forward is an act of great courage on their part, and to be respectful of where they're coming from is really important. In doing this, I'm potentially exposing all of my employees to some really weird stuff. And, as I talked about it with the warden, we wanted to ensure that folks were protected and that we weren't inviting things into our world, or our workplace that would cause trouble. And so we took some steps, but when you talk about spiritual armor, so there's, you protect yourself, with whatever Kevlar and things like that on the physical realm. But when you move into the non-physical realm, your protections are more of a mindset, of a mentality. And when you express compassion, you strengthen your armor. You create a world around you that has compassion, right? And so this is an incredibly powerful thing. And there are many things that are true in the non-physical realms. And you guys have discussed many of them. And some of them can be dangerous if you invite them into your world, right? Everyone is perceiving, of all the things that are true, you shine your flashlight on certain things. And so there's a multitude of true things, right? And they're beyond what most people can possibly imagine. And your awareness, your consciousness is shining a light on the things that are true. And those are the things that become your personal reality, right? And so if you shine your light on evil and destruction, and you allow hatred into your own, what you're projecting, what your beam is pointing at, that makes you vulnerable to those exact things coming into your reality. There's no assertion, there's only invitation. And so this notion of compassion is extremely important. And I've told all my employees that, you don't have to do anything with this. You just say, yes, thank you very much. Always believe the people and never judge them. And be sure that you treat them with respect and kindness. And that's an important first level of protection for them. And then just say, well, the owner knows this guy and they deal with it. It's not my thing. But so I feel like I'm rambling here, but we've had folks that have called in. Do you want to say something before I continue?
Oh, I was going to say with you were talking about flax and Kevlars and protecting yourself. And to me, I always think, especially when we're talking about entities, it's very much kind of like the protection. The Kevlar that you'd wear is very similar to Solomonic magic. Where you're wearing the Seal of Solomon, the secret Seal of Solomon, and you've got a mindset and psychic firewall, so to speak. A level of protection so that your own bullshit, your own shadow, all of that stuff is dealt with beforehand. So when you're in the magic circle and you're pulling something into that triangle, so to speak, with the Solomonic allegory here, that that thing that's in that triangle isn't dealing with your own bullshit there. Like you've done your own shadow work, you've done your own stuff beforehand, so that you're right there one-on-one with whatever it is that you're confronting, so that there's a certain level of protection. And being in an actual magic circle, so to speak, having a tight-knit group of people around there with that have each other's back. So I would imagine too, like the kind of spiritual armor, to use that terminology again, it's very much like Solomonic magic, in my opinion, because we're dealing with forces that have to be contained sometimes, so that they don't escape out. And we're talking about walk-ins, just jump into an employee or jump into someone who lives down the street or something. There's got to be a level of protection there, of cordoning off. Again, if we're using kind of terms like that, to cordon off the magic circle and the triangle, and not necessarily using the Hebrew prayers and everything around it, but using our own version of things like that.
Yeah.
James, what was the most terrifying story you heard concerning the Gorge?
I don't know that I want to go to the place of terrifying. I can tell you, just the other day, this is a stack of envelopes, and a gentleman came in, and each one of these envelopes has got a Sasquatch hair sample in it. He brought in over 100 envelopes, and he's been interacting with these beings for decades. And he was very thankful to have a place to come and talk, and to explain his experiences, and to talk about what he knew, and the pinch points that he knows, where he had the exact same story that you folks are talking about, of interdimensional beings. And there are stories that go way back to before the white settlers came, and the Native Americans have treaties with the Sasquatch about berry fields, and that this is their place where they can come and forage in our realm. And so, the Gorge has been a place where this back and forth between the realms has been easier, and has occurred for centuries and centuries, millennia. And these things are there. And so there's that very real thing. We've had many, many reports of people seeing unusual lights in the sky. And Mount Adams, which we're basically in the shadow of, it's just about, less than 30 miles north of here. There's considered to be a UFO hangar on the slopes of that. And there's even a place called the East City Ranch. I think you may have mentioned it once, Jason, which is very near to there. About 5 minutes away from the East City Ranch is what's called the Mount Adams Abbey. It is a Buddhist monastery and temple and Druid sanctuary. Beautiful place that's open to the public. And they talk about seeing lights frequently, and they talk about interacting with all the different forest spirits that are a part of this unbelievable place. But, actually there is something that I can talk to relating to something that's a little bit scary, Thomas. And there's a young man who called in, or who wrote in and explained that, so there's a town called the Dalles. It's east about 20 miles from the store. And it was officially the end of the Oregon Trail. So that whole video game that everyone died of dysentery in. Well, so the Oregon Trail ended at the Dalles, and then you would hop on a river raft and make your way to the coast if you wanted to from there. And he said that all of the youth of the Dalles are cursed, and that this curse was placed on them by the Native Americans, who were incredibly angry about what was being done to their homeland. And it was a really heartbreaking tale that he and many of the youth from that community do feel cursed, and they feel disenfranchised, and they feel, he had a lot of things to explain about, drug use and other things that felt like that you were trapped in this place. And even if you tried to escape, you couldn't escape.
Wow.
And so, I talked about it with the warden, and he had me right back to this kid. And what he said was that there is no curse that can be placed upon a person that the sufferer of the curse cannot break themselves. It's an absolute law of the universe. And it's believable to me that an energy surrounding the notion of a curse and could gain strength and momentum. And it's easy for me to believe that it may have been started by one group of people or another group of people or whatever. And it's kind of irrelevant how it got started. The belief that it exists is the important thing. And the advice the warden gave to this young man was that you can break this curse, but it requires some mental discipline. And that discipline is that whenever you feel your mind moving into darker thoughts, to bring consciousness to that moment and to change the subject to something better. And that if you're moving into a dark thought because it feels bad, like you will have the thought and it will depress you, or it'll make you angry or something of that nature. And so the way to move out of that curse, and it's, it takes discipline, it takes a mental awareness, it takes bringing consciousness to the moment. But those things can be dealt with on a personal, individual level. You don't need someone to fly in on a magic horse and save you. You can do it yourself. And the other thing that, you can look at all these things and they're unusual, they're strange, they can feel scary. Ultimately, where we're moving towards has just as much wonder and beauty as it does scary things. And the world that you are going to find yourself in is really going to be dependent on what you invite in to your own awareness and consciousness, and where you focus what you feed with your own mental energy. And so part of this whole project of gathering this information is sort of understanding what's happening and what's going on. But the things that happen here in the Gorge, they'll happen here first, but they're eventually going to happen all over the place. It's going to get to a point as the energy influx gets stronger and stronger, things are going to change. And, we can find ourselves in a world of chaos and unpleasantness, or we can find ourselves in a world that is different, but also very beautiful and wondrous. And, the world that each of us find ourselves in is really going to be dependent on what we focus on.
Yep.
That's great.
That's really, really good information there. And it's just that whole concept again is, if all of us are kind of the architects of our own destiny, we're all, a magician is able to take, their mental psychical reality and mock that up in the physical reality, whether you're a ceremonial magician, you work with ritual, or you're an average Joe out on the street, your thoughts become actions, you know, and they mock up in the physical universe, you know, the inner world, the esoteric world within your mind, within your heart. So yeah, that's some really good advice there. But I kind of wanted to ask you too, just before we get off the topic of strange stories, were there any more, you know, weird, fascinating UFO stories or any other entities that people have seen there, or you know, some of the real meat of those things?
You know, I hope you guys are able to come out in a couple of weeks. I'll show you some of the amazing places. One is a place called Horse Thieves Butte. It's right near Horse Thieves Lake. And it looks like a desert mesa from the road. And it's right there on the banks of the Columbia. But when you get up into it, it's riddled with a maze of hidden canyons and amphitheaters. The walls are covered in petroglyphs. And it is a place of considerable power. And there have been, we've had numerous reports in that area of seeing different entities, experiencing different energies. And, you know, a lot of folks can get hung up on the idea that you're seeing some type of physical creature or entity walking around. Oftentimes, it's more subtle than that. Now, at Horse Thieves Butte, you can look down into Horse Thieves Lake. Like I said, it is one of the most stunningly beautiful places that I know of, and clearly a place of great power. I was there at dusk one evening, looking down into the lake, which is probably about maybe 1,500 feet away, but down a significant cliff. And I saw something swimming in the water that was easily larger than a man, and it was on the surface. And I know of no creature that a normal creature that's that size that would be in the water in the gorge. Now, some people might say there's sturgeon, and they can grow to be, you know, 8, 10, 12 feet long. But this was a surface creature that was occasionally going under the water and then coming back up, but easily larger than a man. And so that's one that I know that I want to investigate a little further to figure out exactly what that was. I'm not sure if I ever will figure it out, but so there's that. It's personal experience. There's also what's called the Natural Bridges area. I think there was a picture in the article. This is it was formerly a lava tube. And so lava tube is formed when lava flows, and then outside of the lava flow hardens. And so it insulates the rock, and then the lava flows through, and eventually the lava flows out, and what's left behind is a hollow tube. And so this one was formed, I don't even know how long ago. And it's sort of a little bit southwest of Mount Adams. And so parts of this tube have collapsed, and so it's created this probably mile-long trench, and in this trench are 7 or 8 tunnel caves. And we have had a lot of folks report time loss in that area, where, you know, they'll go in and by the time they come out, hours have passed, and they don't think that they've been in the tubes that long. And, you know, there've been some other sensations of entities around while in the caves and things like that. So that's another place that is fascinating. There are several areas, again, close to Beacon Rock, where you folks were, or you were looking for that, I guess. There have been, you know, numerous Squatch sightings. And again, throughout the whole gorge, seeing aerial phenomenon, very, very common. A lot of interesting stuff going on there. And yeah, and so like I said, we are seeing more and more folks. And I think what is amazing to me is, you know, there was a businessman who came in, works in the insurance industry, was wearing a tie and a suit, and was telling me about his Sasquatch experiences. And so here in the gorge, it's even the people who, you know, are going to church on Sunday, and living quote unquote normal lives are having pretty phenomenal supernatural experiences. And again, right now it's ramping up.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we're noticing enough things up here on this end of the Columbia River occurring too. But that's one thing we definitely need to do for our audience out there. We are planning on making a trip down there to do a little bit of filming and to get more information out there to the public and see some of these places on camera and get us talking about it. So we're definitely really looking forward to that. And before we wrap things up here, Timothy, Thomas, is there anything else you'd like to say or ask James here before we wrap this up?
Those are brilliant stories. Thank you so much for coming on. I've just been captivated this whole time. just listening was just amazing. Thank you so much.
I couldn't interject because I just love your storytelling. Write a book. You know, this is fascinating stuff.
Yeah, my previous experiences, you know, I had some very unusual experiences in the military, and very unusual experiences after the military, and so I'm thankful that those opened me up to recognizing that there is more than just the everyday physical reality that we knock around in. And, you know, I feel very fortunate that we have this friend of the family who had this need, and we were able to, you know, provide a forum or a place that people could come and, you know, file their reports. And again, you know, we would love for, you know, the Beyond Room 313 viewers to come visit us in Bingen. So, you know, if you use the code word Beyond Room 313, we'll give you a 5% discount on anything in the store.
That's so cool.
And we definitely want to have you back on for part 2, where we can talk about some of your military experiences. That's something that we've got in common, you and me, there, to talk about some of the strange things from within our military background. But let's definitely have you back on here real soon, and we'll be coming out to do some filming here in the next few weeks, or whenever we can make our schedules line up.
I'll email you. We'll figure it out.
Awesome. Sounds good.
I just have to say, I have to laugh at what you said at the beginning, not laugh at you, but laugh at the concept that you said that some people using your store as a marketing device for the local paranormal stuff. It's like, would they say it to a shop that's selling fishing tackle and the guy has all the best fishing shop? You know, it's ridiculous. It's an absolutely ridiculous thing to say. I mean, if I was in your position, I'd be making that central to the whole thing, because it does provide a service that people do want. They do want to explore these. There's a huge audience for this kind of stuff. And I mean, so, you know, well done in actually doing that. I'm amazed that the detractors would actually say something like that, because it's so, you know, you know, it's like all this, the places around Loch Ness are not supposed to, like, you know, market their connection to Nessie and stuff like. It's ridiculous. So, you know, I just ignored it, and that's a ridiculous excuse that was.
Yeah. Well, you know, we're very fortunate in that, you know, the stores are successful, and, you know, we're able to do this extra thing, you know, and so it's work that I think is important.
Absolutely. And so, well, this hour has flown by, and I would say this has definitely been one of my favorite Beyond Room 313 symposiums here with James Szubski, and we definitely would like to have you back here real soon. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll be back again here real soon with James. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.